Welcome in, everybody. We are so glad to have East Texas Congressional Representative Nathaniel Moran with us today. Congressman Moran, appreciate you taking a little bit of time for us.
Yeah, some important things going on in the world.
Yes.
Great time for conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into it. Just like you mentioned, it was February 27th and 28th. We had, I would call, a historic attack over in Iran. It seemed like it came a couple days early by what some of the reports are saying, but what can you tell us about where you stand, about where the U.S. was whenever they decided to pivot and go ahead and move forward with that attack with Israel?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with what President Trump did this past weekend. It was clear, has been clear for several months now that the president has been giving Iran the opportunity to come to the peace table and to work out a deal without the necessity for military strikes, but Iran simply was not willing to do that. With the military buildup over there, the briefing of the Gang of Eight last week, it was clear that this was imminent. And so it was no surprise to me that it happened, although the day and the hour was not known to me, but I wholeheartedly support what President Trump is doing. This is a national security interest matter for the United States long term, to protect our citizens here and abroad from attacks by Iran, both directly and through their proxies.
Absolutely. Now, again, at least the reports that I did some digging on, it seemed like the strike was coming for March the 3rd. It seemed like that's kind of when the planned attack was. What do you feel like the next steps are for the U.S. and Israel after we have a targeted strike like this one? What are the next steps for the United States?
It's probably going to last several weeks. We're looking at, I think, 4 to 6 weeks of activity. Iran can defend for a while, but they don't have the organizational structure now, nor do they have the military capability to withstand the onslaught that's occurring presently. And that's the way it's intended. President Trump has said from the beginning, look, if we're going to go in strong. We're going to have overwhelming strength, and we're going to win. And that's what he intends to do. He does not want to have a long-term military conflict. He doesn't want war. He's a president that wants peace, but he knows peace only comes through strength. We've got a great partner in Israel that was part of the initial strikes. We're getting more and more partners throughout the Arab world as the days go by, because Iran has miscalculated how they should react, instead of reacting in a way that would have gotten them to the peace table quickly, which again President Trump offered even after the initial strikes. They've turned that down. Instead of that, they began lobbying missiles towards other Arab nations, and that has turned those Arab nations against them and on our side.
Well, Congressman Moran, President Trump has stood behind Israel his whole time in office. First term and throughout this second term. Now, some of the world's strongest powers, Russia, China, namely, they seemingly put their strengths behind Iran at that time. So what is the significance of President Trump standing firm behind the nation of Israel?
Yeah, it's no surprise that China and Russia are taking Iran's side in this. I've talked frequently over the past couple of years about this growing axis of totalitarianism. I talked about it quite frequently during the Biden administration, when the United States would not act with strength, and our weakness on the world stage allowed this axis to grow in strength and dominance. So China and Russia, no doubt, are upset because one of their allies, one of their friends in the world of supporting others that would be against the United States is now diminished. And so it certainly would be concerned to China and Russia. This is part of the reason why the United Nations is so ineffective, because we have the UN Security Council, those permanent members include China and Russia. And so nothing gets done through the United Nations. So the United States knows we must take action if we're going to protect ourselves and our allies like Israel. We have to take activity like this to say on the front end, we're not going to wait for you to get ballistic missile capability that can harm us here in the United States. We're not going to wait for you to get enough ballistic missiles to bomb our friend and ally Israel or our troops in the Middle East. We're not going to wait for you to get nuclear capabilities. We're going to take care of that now while we can, and we should.
Many Iranians right now are celebrating. They're celebrating the downfall of this regime, at least the supreme leader over there, celebrating in the streets, and some not taking it so well. We just had the other day, it seemed like an attack based off of that initial strike down in Austin that killed several Americans on U.S. soil. Looking at that, what can you say about the U.S. plans to get ahead of that? Because if there is any fallout from that targeted strike in Iran, we don't want that to happen on our turf.
Yeah, we don't. Again, this really is about, at the end of the day, national security for our citizens, both domestically and abroad. The Department of Homeland Security appropriations is a big issue now, bigger than it was even in the past couple of weeks. We know the Democrats have been playing politics with this. It's the one portion of our government that is not funded presently because the Democrats have held it up in the Senate. I anticipate that this week the House is going to retake up those DHS appropriations to put the Democrats on the line again to say, look, even now, in this moment when Homeland Security is heightened, that level of security is necessary. Are you really going to vote against appropriations? And we'll see how they do that. I'm certainly going to support the appropriations package. It was a bipartisan package that was negotiated, that was ready to be passed by the Democrats. But again, they're just playing politics. We'll see how far they're willing to take that. We need to pass that immediately, though, and the incident down in Austin is a good reason why.
Right, and that's something that's on the minds of a lot of people because there's rumors that float around about these so-called supercells across America. It's some near Dallas, some in New York, Los Angeles, other places like that. What about East Texas? Is that a concern so much in East Texas, if at all?
Well, our citizens should always be observant to their surroundings around them, what's going on, the circumstances, and make sure to report something if they see something that is of concern. But we don't want to live in fear. We shouldn't live in fear. It is concerning as you look back and see the tens of thousands of people that the Biden administration allowed to cross over freely during the last 4 years of the prior administration. We've been unwinding that best we can over the past 14 months, but it's concerning to think about the possibility of what's happening if those networks are actively organizing within the United States. But again, our folks don't need to be fearful of that. What they do need to be is prudent and wise about the things that they do, the choices they make about where they're going and how they're going about their lives. It's always prudent to be thinking in those terms.
So shifting gears a little bit, we've talked about the Department of Homeland Security funding. It's been an issue for a while. Obviously, we've talked about national security. So where are we at right now? Where can you tell us about those negotiations? Because the longer we get away from a deal, the further implications it's going to have nationwide.
Yeah, I agree with you. The DHS appropriations is critical to our national security. Our Homeland Security Department was formed after the 9/11 attacks, and it was an important agency to establish so that we could keep our folks safe and sound here in the United States. I expect that the DHS appropriations bill will come back up in the House this week for a vote. We'll see if the Democrats continue to resist. They've so far had 10 demands that they're not willing to move on, and those demands are unreasonable in my opinion, and certainly in the opinion of the President of the United States, until they come back to the table and be reasonable and come back to, frankly, the appropriations bill that they had already agreed to, that was on the verge of being passed when they decided they were going to play politics with that issue. When they get reasonable again, then we will get this thing passed. But until we get 60 votes in the Senate, we can't do that.
All right. And so I know you mentioned several things there that they have been stern on. So for people who don't know, what are some of those things and why is it so concerning?
Well, one of the things is making sure that they're demanding that all of these ICE agents actually take off masks and that they are known, their identities are known in those instances. That's in my opinion, a real problem because these folks are on the line just enforcing the law that's there, and there's so much political vitriol on the other side where the left is trying to target these individuals for simply following the rule of law and following the commands of the folks above them, that their families will be targeted, they will be targeted. You will see a level of violence, I think, on the individuals that are simply trying to do a law enforcement job if that rule goes into place. So that's just one of the many things that I think is an unreasonable demand, a mandate that they want to put in place, and that is certainly not a discretionary matter, not a mandate that should get put in place, but certainly should be left to the discretion of the department, given the security concerns.
Absolutely. A lot happening on the national scale. I know you've stayed busy. I know your colleagues have stayed busy. Looking back on a more local level, Election Day, March primary, March 3rd, it's coming up. Looking at the turnout so far, Democrats have really shown up to the polls in early voting. Of course, that could always flip on Election Day. What can you say to those voters that haven't gone out to vote, especially on the Republican side, about the importance that it has, not just locally, because it obviously matters locally, but it does have impacts on a nationwide scale?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone, whether or not they're Democrat or Republican, to get out and vote in the primaries. It is so critical that we have everyone's voice heard at the ballot box on March 3rd for the primaries. That sets up a good general debate and general fight, and that's what we want. We want to see that debate of ideology, and that's what drives America's greatness, is to have that competitiveness through the democratic process of voting. But people got to get out and vote. You'd be surprised how low turnout generally is in primaries. For the Democrats this time around, it's the first time in a long time they've had a very heated primary, and the U.S. Senate candidates certainly are bringing out, I think, a lot more voters on the Democratic side. So to see their turnout, that's really not surprising, because for at least the last 20 years, they really haven't had much going on the primary side. And certainly, I think in November, I don't think it's going to matter one way or the other, because you're going to see the Republicans continue to dominate in the general election in November, because Texas is the bastion of conservatism. It's the greatest place for freedom, even in my opinion, in the United States, because we know how freedom has to be won, and we know how freedom has to be kept, and that means in large part showing up to the ballot box.
And Congressman Moran, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. A lot of insightful information from our local representative in Washington.